Hi everyone, welcome to The Hash, your daily beat on crypto and culture. I'm Naomi Brockwell, joined by our other wonderful co-hosts, Ben Powers, Jen Sanasi, Will Foxley, and Zach Seward. Welcome to the show, guys. Another big day lined up.
You know it. Let's do this thing. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Let's go.
All right, let's kick
All
off
right.
by throwing to Zach. Big news there.
Big news today in the in the latest sign of Wall Street's adoption of Bitcoin. BNY Mellon, which is America's oldest bank with many trillions under custody, has announced a crypto custody play. So this will enable. It's not live yet. They didn't commit to an exact launch date, but when it's live, clients of BNY Mellon will be able to keep their Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in safekeeping with the storied financial institution. This is another big watershed moment in the Wall Street narrative around Bitcoin over the tail end of last year and obviously now this year. I want to throw it to you, Ben, for the potential impact of something like this. This broke on the Wall Street Journal this morning, and CoinDesk was certainly on top of this story as well. But what are you seeing out there in terms of what people are thinking about this news on BNY Mellon?
I mean, I think this is just, as you said, this is a huge move in the Wall Street narrative around this, right? Like these customers, I think in the story it was saying there's 41 trillion in custody there. Like these are big players, these customers. And so this is going to give them an option. And you're just seeing, the machinations behind the scenes with some of these names that might not roll off the tongue for your average person, but for, hedge funds, for others, for other banks, like they are all keeping a keen eye out on this. So this is a really promising sign in that regard. And, just one more step on this road that we've seen developing.
Yeah, and speaking to that road, a few weeks ago, my colleague Ian Allison broke the news on Goldman Sachs reportedly rolling out a custody option as well in the coming weeks. So with this news that came out today, BNY Mellon beats Goldman to the punch. But I would imagine that we'll see similar offerings from similarly large financial institutions going forward. Naomi, I want to kick this to you on the philosophical question. Is this Bitcoin being co-opted by Wall Street, and how does Bitcoin retain some of its cypherpunk ethos going forward?
I don't think Bitcoin can be co-opted, and that's what's so great about it, because you can have all these players entering the space, you can have people custodying assets for others, but Bitcoin doesn't necessitate it. As long as 51% of all of the clients running are saying we run a version that is free and no one has control, people have the choice to use this outside of the financial system. Just that choice is all we need. We don't need to dictate that it has to be free for everyone. Some people might prefer centralized models. For some people, it's better. There's less friction, but other people want that freedom. And it's so great that now we have something that is being championed by huge players who are really, setting this up so that Bitcoin really can't be shut down at this stage. You have so many giant players involved. So now that this has so much support from huge numbers of people, I feel like we're in the future. I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like we've made it. Like this is the mainstream adoption we hoped for. This is giving people a choice in currency. I could not be more excited. Jen, what are your thoughts on all of this? Have we made it? Are we in the future now?
I think we're heading towards the future. And I think just the mere fact that it broke on the Wall Street Journal and that Bitcoin is literally in the headlines every single day means that, it's so much more mainstream than this time last year. And we're just accelerating at such a speed. So I don't know if we're in the future yet, but I think we're getting there very, very quickly. Will, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this kind of brings me back to the Nakamoto quote from like 2011, where it's like, you might want to get some in case it catches on. I think everyone's trying to rush in to get some before it really, really catches on and we have $100,000 coin on our hands. So like I'm actually wondering, go ahead.
No, you continue. I was going to continue off.
Well, I have a question for the group. What do you guys think matters more? A company like Tesla purchasing Bitcoin or a firm like BNY Mellon allowing customers to buy Bitcoin through them?
Maybe matters for who?
From you,
I'll take a hack at that. I mean, I think the BNY Mellon one is significantly larger because it represents a client groundswell, right? Anyone from a major institution to someone with a trust fund, right, could potentially go to BNY Mellon, their trusted financial institution, and say, "Hey, I bought 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, $1 million in Bitcoin, and I want you guys to keep it safe for me." I think that's potentially really powerful for folks who are sort of waiting for that mainstreaming of this asset class. It is interesting to see this accelerate so quickly, and for me, the ability for institutions, family offices, and even rinky-dink trust funds to be able to go to a BNY Mellon and say, "Hey, hold my Bitcoin for me like you would any other asset is actually quite powerful. Naomi, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's huge news. I won't underplay the role of Elon, though, because he is such a trendsetter on the other side of things, because you have institutional investors, then you have Elon Musk, who's like, I'm going to do whatever I want, YOLO. And so that could be a really powerful influence for a lot of people. And so just having him saying, hey, I'm going all in on this, and I'm the king of the Doge. Like, it's kind of great that he provides that cultural push, while at the same time the institutions are saying, actually, we back this up. It's a very interesting play that's happening at the moment. Interesting balance.
Yeah, it just feels like they're speaking to two different audiences, Will. And that's why I was, kind of asking, like, who is this? When you say what's more impactful, it's like,
right.
Elon's speaking to Twitter, and he's speaking to, kind of your more average person. He obviously has a much higher profile, just kind of to your average Joe than BNY Mellon. And so, I just don't think the conversations cross over in exactly that way.
Interesting take. Yeah, so my quick take would be, I think BNY Mellon matters more, but I'll hand it over to Zach there.
And I, in turn, will hand it over to Ben, who has another similarly interesting mainstream adoption story for us. Ben.
Exactly. Money, money, money. Again, on the payment side, our own Danny Nelson on CoinDesk broke the news that MasterCard is going to allow merchants to start accepting cryptocurrencies this year. Now, this is a huge play just because of that customer base and because that infrastructure is all there already. And, we still have yet to get exact details about what cryptocurrencies they're going to support, but those are going to be coming down the pipe. Sort of similarly, Twitter is also going to be accepting payments on the platform. It looks like they're experimenting with letting users tip other users, tip other accounts and things like that. So we can see more transacting here. We're just seeing money start to move. So the group, what does it think? I have my thoughts, but tell me, how does this news hit you?
I think it's pretty cool. Although we have seen payments on Twitter through third parties for a long time, when Twitter just didn't jump on the bandwagon for so long. You had all these other companies picking up the slack. And so you've had all kinds of tipper bots operating on Twitter. I use them all the time to tip people. And then you had Brave. You can, they started integrating with Twitter so that you can click on it and send people Brave tips with basic attention tokens. So this is not a new phenomenon, but I think this will take it to the mainstream. So before you had kind of fringe people like myself using these things, but having Twitter actually integrate it natively, that's kind of cool. Jen, do you want to give us your thoughts?
Yeah, I also think it's super cool. The question that popped into my head when I was reading the MasterCard story is, it's really cool that they're going to allow merchants to accept crypto, but what's it going to take to get merchants to accept crypto? And I don't know what the answer is there. Like, how do we encourage this mainstream adoption when it comes to people accepting payments? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take a stab at it. I think tax law has to change. I think that's the only thing that needs to change, honestly.
Yeah.
I would take payment in Bitcoin from CoinDesk if I could. I mean, it's 300% up in 2020. Like, yeah, of course I get paid in Bitcoin, but I don't want to take the tax liability, and I know merchants don't either. So I think that is probably one of the bigger reasons. Volatility also, of course, for merchants. But hand it over to Zach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Will. I'm like super bearish on Bitcoin as a payments vehicle at this point in time, largely because of the tax questions that exist. Where this gets really interesting to me is around stablecoins such as USDC. If USDC effectively becomes a widely accepted currency for purchases, and also a currency that you can get yield on for just letting it sit in your Coinbase account, I think that becomes a pretty interesting possible future where one could necessarily kind of exist outside of the fiat system as long as you're able to get money into the crypto system to begin with. So when we talk about stable coins running on these networks, that's where I start to be interested. But the idea that people are going to start like buying stuff with Bitcoin, we've seen this story before. Those cards are out there. No one's doing it. But if there's widely accepted by merchants, and if we're talking about stable coins rather than volatile assets that people can just, are seeing as investments, I think then it gets really interesting. Ben.
Yeah, and didn't Danny Nelson hint at that in his reporting that, stable coins seem to be the most likely vehicle here in some ways?
Yeah, and shout out to that Danny piece. Huge scoop, but also really well done, really well written in terms of, hey, they may be building it, but will people come? And especially with Bitcoin, I think the answer may be no. But on stablecoins, I think the answer could be yes. Should we see the wide stream adoption on the merchant end? But we'll see.
Yeah, and they referenced that a little bit, I believe. In Mastercard's blog post confirming the news that came after the story, they said, we're not encouraging adoption. We just want to give people options. And so that seems to be the play that they're making here in some ways. I think, Naomi, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, so I know a lot of people who are living off the grid entirely on crypto, which is kind of cool. They're buying all their groceries in crypto, they're paying for fuel, they're using things like Bitrefill and Purse.io and other things like that, but it's definitely not mainstream. And you're right, it's the tax issue is a huge issue for people. Either you have to do it off the grid or you have to go through hell trying to figure out how to report all of this stuff. But also just finding merchants is difficult because, as you said, unless you're in the crypto space, and luckily, like where these people are living, there are lots of merchants who accept it without any third party.
Where are these people living, Naomi?
These people are in places like Townsville and Queensland. They're in New Hampshire. They're in there are pockets all over the world where you have these communities living off crypto. It's super cool. That's a future I want to see, but it's we're not there yet because the tax issue is a really difficult issue.
All right, we're going to leave it there for segment 1. Coming up after the break, let's talk about Twitter in India. Some really interesting censorship questions going on over in that part of the world. Stick with us on The Hash. We love you. We'll see you soon.
If I think about what I would like to cover in history, 20, 30 years ago, it would have been the internet. It would have been the whole social media boom. Now this is our turn. This is this generation's turn to cover the future of money, Web 3.0. We're going to see a huge paradigm shift. We're going to see how it lives digitally, natively in the internet. We're going to see that transformation shift. We're building a financial system across the world with Bitcoin, several other cryptocurrencies, digital currencies made by central banks, and that is going to be epic.
Welcome back to The Hash, everyone. You are joining us for your daily beat on crypto and culture, and we're going to talk about what's going on in India at the moment. So Twitter just banned a whole bunch of accounts, like over 500 of them at the request of the Prime Minister. And these were accounts that were critical of Prime Minister Modi. And it presents the question, how involved in politics should Twitter be? How much should this be a free speech platform? Initially, they did push back because of this fear, but then there was fear that local employees would be put in prison if they didn't comply. So it's a huge issue. They've definitely become involved increasingly in politics as of late, as we've seen. What are your thoughts on this? Jen, I'm going to hand this straight over to you. The idea of Twitter becoming increasingly involved in politics and doing things at the whim of governments, especially in a world where governments don't necessarily agree. Are we going to have everyone censored on the platform eventually?
It feels like we're heading that way. And for me, it's like Twitter, they're getting so involved in politics on one hand, and yet they are building a decentralized platform on the other hand, and they're very kind of accepting of what's happening in the crypto universe. So that is a little bit weird for me. This story made me start thinking a lot about the conversations we've been having over the past couple days about decentralized social networks, and thinking about how censorship is handled in China and we're seeing now in Myanmar. And it got me thinking, if the networks start shutting down social media like we see them doing in China, the telecoms companies, is a decentralized social network a solution, or do we need to start looking at something else?
It's a good question. Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, my question there is, was the something else, right?
I don't know.
Is it a decentralized
internet? Is that possible?
I mean, these things are tricky. Yeah, with the Twitter news, it was really disappointing just because I had seen previously that they were standing up to what was going on there and saying, no, we're not going to shut down these accounts. And it was, an interesting sort of pivot from sometimes that you see in other instances. And so just them standing up and saying no, that gave me some hope. And then to see it turn so quickly within 24 hours was disappointing for a variety of ways. But it does show, that they have, I don't want to say constituents, that's maybe the wrong word, but if a centralized government's going to put pressure on them by threatening to jail local employees, like that's a whole nother level, and just shows the kind of machinations that a government can take in terms of getting these communications networks shut down and really stifling dissenting voices. In this case, farmers that are protesting and are very much so against new agricultural laws and have been seeing a lot of pressure put on them by the government itself. So, it's, I don't want to say an inflection point, was just another sort of instance of this playing out in real time. And we've seen tons of these. So, I mean, Jen, maybe to your question, I'm not sure exactly what an alternative would look like, but these decentralized networks seem to be a good place to start thinking about it. But yeah, if we're looking at huge telecommunications companies or ISPs and what alternative models to that might look like, it gets much larger very quickly. And I think that that's going to be a conversation to be had, but the scale of getting there is going to be quite hard.
And it's a question also of where these accounts were. Were these all Indian accounts that were shut down? Were these accounts in America that were critical of Prime Minister Modi? Like, where do we start to draw the line? Because I know that Zoom, they shut down American accounts when they were critical of Chinese government, right? And they did it at the behest of China. So they just become this jurisdictional issue when we're dealing with the internet, which is largely without a geographical location. I mean, you could bounce things off any server anywhere in the world, right? So like, where are these places located? Who has jurisdiction over this? Do these countries have the right to say this? I mean, can they ban the app from their entire country if they don't comply? And are citizens doing something illegal if they start using VPNs and just end up, using things outside of the country? Like, it's this very tricky, gray area, and we're trying to figure out what rules apply in the ether.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's so interesting to see not these things just become disinformation tools or misinformation tools. We've seen their infrastructure co-opted for this, obviously, but government's just starting to ban things, right? Like, I think Clubhouse recently got banned in China. So there's another instance of a networking app being shut down. And then, previously there was there was a ton of different, bans going on of social media apps in between India and China in particular, but also you saw it here in the US with, Trump threatening to ban TikTok and then not really following through on that. So they're becoming little tools in these geopolitical wars. And I think that's really interesting when not just the infrastructure is getting co-opted, but also shut down altogether. Because that's just a much starker and much more difficult thing to grapple with. But honestly, governments can do this. Like, what is stopping them? Obviously, outside of public outcry and maybe advocacy work and other things, we see bans and censorship being carried out on a daily basis in countries all over the world.
Yeah, Will, what were you going to say?
Yeah, just to jump in there, I think in a sense, it's almost not surprising when you're looking at like a global scale and looking at the cultures that we're coming across. Twitter is very much so a Western invention, and it's a decentralized network. But we look at the some of these Asian countries have a very different cultural setup and mindset, and so it's not necessarily surprising in a sense that they want to take these kind of paths, I guess. Not that they're good choices, in my opinion, that Twitter is being shut down in that country, but it is just something that's a little bit different from at least the perspective I've grown up with in the United States, where decentralized power is part of what we know. We have 50 states and we have different counties and different cities, and everything's kind of decentralized. That's what we were born into. But if you look at these other countries, that's not how things go. And so you have to ask yourself, which one is better? It's not necessarily about that. It's just different models. And so I think that is just kind of the larger picture, like the macro question there. There's a huge cultural story to be told alongside this.
Yeah, I am definitely going to err on the side of freedom of the press and freedom of speech. I moved countries because I prefer the freedom of speech in America than in my own country. But definitely India has super strict controls on the internet. I have a friend who lives there who says that the internet is shut down every other week. They literally just shut down the entire internet whenever there's like a local election, et cetera, because it's a way to, for people to group together, to form and push back against people in power. A lot of governments don't like that. You see seen that happen all across the world. Like the first thing that governments go after is communication when they're threatened. So I love seeing platforms like Twitter being a place where people can come together and push back against, authoritarianism, corruption, all of that. But shutting down the internet is the go-to that a lot of these places have. In India, the people are pushing back on the side of crypto because they were trying to ban, cryptocurrency there. That's in the works. So exchanges have started this joint initiative to push back. So we'll see what happens there. But Jen, let's throw to you and tell us what's going on in the NFT space right now.
All right. Well, non-fungible tokens are going mainstream. Microsoft and Engen recently launched a game that rewards players with NFTs for use inside Minecraft. And social token app Fuse is offering up the chance to play beer pong with Post Malone. So, I mean, that sounds fun. I'd like to play beer pong with Post Malone. But I want to talk about NFTs. We had a conversation last week. We weren't on the air about it, but those two examples I just brought up, one is within education, one is within the entertainment industry. Both industries have been flipped upside down throughout COVID, and NFTs are really kind of solving an issue here and allowing people to be more engaged with their education, allowing entertainers to make money in a different way. I only recently learned how NFTs work, so I'm going to throw it to one of you guys to explain in the simplest terms how they work.
Will, you take this. You're our NFT
NFT guy.
I was slightly bearish on NFTs until I think reality smacked me in the face the last 2 weeks, and they've really been popping off. But okay, an NFT is a token design on the Ethereum blockchain. Typically, it can be on other blockchains, and it's called the ERC 721 standard. What this token does is allows you to claim digital ownership over whatever item you attach that tag to. So it's kind of in the sense that you have like a serial number on your cereal box, right? And you like scan it at checkout, and you know that that cereal box has that serial number, and that's your cereal, and you know that. Okay. Same sense, both a blockchain. You can throw anything on there. So if you want to do digital art, sure, just throw a little tag on there, and it's unique. The non-fungible aspect of it is kind of differentiates itself from other types of token standards. The ERC20 is the most common standard on Ethereum, and across all blockchains, it's like 95% of tokens. And that is a fungible token. So every token is the same in that sense, but these tokens are different. They're individual units, and you can treat them as individual units, and they're not fungible in that sense that traditional money is. So that's kind of where the difference in the tech is. I'm going to throw it over to Zach because he's always got some color on NFTs.
Yeah, for sure. I think the social token stuff is super interesting. I've been seeing this more and more as like a carnival ticket. It's like a digital carnival ticket. All right, I got my token. I'm ready for the ride. It's either like a beer pong with Post Malone, or like there's like some silly ones where you can like play video games with like Lil Pump, or like there was Portugal the Man. They did one. You can like hang out with them and watch old shows. So I think this evolution in the music industry space is really interesting, where people are increasingly willing to experiment with ways to bring revenue on board during a time when these folks can't tour. Like that's sort of the context that's really important here. That's forced a lot of this experimentation into the mainstream, right? You know, these folks are losing a major revenue stream thanks to COVID. So you know, the time looks right to roll out some cool things that both boost fan engagement and to bring in a little bit of money. So I think that's the interesting thing on the social token front. I'm definitely watching, there's a few companies behind these things. Fuse is one of them. Rally is one of them. I think Roll is the other one. And it's a bit of a celebrity arms race between those folks. And I think it could get interesting on the social token side of things. Ben, I think you wanted to say something.
I mean, I've just been thinking through this whole conversation, just zooming way out, because I'm trying to think about like, why should I care about these things, or why do people care? Because I don't in particular. And it just seems really interesting and kind of points to like our desire for something to be unique. Again, I was thinking about this, Zach, when you were talking about these, social tokens and these unique like experiences that people can get, or even like, the way I think about this is like Fortnite skins, which I've talked about previously, these like unique sort of rewards that you get for engaging with something for a certain amount of time, or demonstrating a certain amount of skill, or spending an amount of money in some of these things. And so it just feels like, given the sort of infinite reproducibility of things online in these digital worlds that we're like kind of stuck in by nature of a pandemic right now, but we've been moving towards like something that can't be recreated or something that, can't, you can call your own in this space where everything is sort of pixelated and redistributed and repackaged and commodified. So I don't know. That's what I've been thinking about as we've been having this conversation. I'm asking like, why do people want these and why should I care?
Well,
Yeah,
I can
for
jump
sure.
in there
And
really quick. If I
go
can, I
ahead,
want to
Will.
grab a really nice quote from Lex Solokin, who's a CoinDesk columnist, and he wrote yesterday on NFTs. I'm just going to read it really quick. A reproduction of the Mona Lisa, even if a perfect stroke for stroke, is similarly not valuable because it is not the original. Therefore, the art is valuable not only for its collection of particular atoms in some particular order, but for its historical and social context. With digital NFT, the same logic is true. Just because you have an identical JPEG to the one anchored to the blockchain does not mean you have an original worth anything, nor does your ability to look at it suggest anything from a collectible point of view. So it's kind of the idea that, like, yeah, you can like create a print of the Mona Lisa, but it's not the original. And in a digital world, if you have an original that's anchored on a blockchain and proved that way, then it's going to accrue value. So sorry to cut in there on you.
No, that's such a great point.
Yeah.
We're actually we're going to leave that there, and we're going to be talking about Avalanche after the break. So coming up, some issues going on and developers rushing to fix them. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to The Hash. We're turning over to blockchain land a little bit more, in particular with Avalanche. Avalanche is a decentralized platform similar to Ethereum, but it is the idea of Amin Gunsour, who is a Cornell professor who also was instrumental in the development of Ethereum. They had a few problems this morning. Their blockchain kind of broke, but not completely. What happened was there's a bug in this really particular function of the chain itself, and transactions that were supposed to take less than a half second to process were taking up to 4 hours, and developers were up all night trying to fix it. So I want to move this conversation over to Zach, knowing that there's a lot of Ethereum killers out there, but they seem to be sputtering right when the market is taking off. So what do you think about that as our managing editor for these kind of things?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know about sputtering. These things are super hard to get up and running, and we saw that with Ethereum 1.x, and we will surely see it with Ethereum 2.0 in the coming months and years. But I think the whole base layer race is super duper interesting. You have, let's see, what are the big ones? We got Solana, we got Near, we got Avalanche. What am I forgetting, Will? Hold on. We got Polkadot, we got Cosmos. We have all these new layer ones that are trying to figure out what their calling card is going to be after Ethereum has established itself really around DeFi, right? DeFi is kind of the killer app of Ethereum, right? Where I can do all these crazy banking applications and all sorts of fun borrowing and lending, plus games, NFTs, you name it. The only problem is the transaction fees on Ethereum right now are staggeringly high. It's sort of a victim of its own success, according to a lot of folks. So obviously, over the last few years, people have been building other base layers that can do some of those other things. I guess I'm curious, like, Will, if you had to associate Avalanche in your mind, I know it's a base layer, so it can do anything. But if you had to sort of associate Avalanche with maybe one or two of those specialties, like where do you see Avalanche sort of fitting in the base layer race going forward?
Yeah, they've kind of taken a interesting route. So what they're trying to do is merge two consensus mechanisms, this is pretty dorky, but it's interesting. There's Nakamoto consensus, which is what Bitcoin uses, and then there's classical consensus, which is what like your average Macintosh uses or whatever. And they've kind of merged them together with the point of being like, hey, we should be able to use a layer one for payments. And nobody else has taken that route. Bitcoin hasn't done that. Ethereum hasn't done that. And these other projects have done that. They're all building layer two solutions like the Lightning Network or rollups or whatever. So they are taking that particular route. And I could see them just keep if it works out and they fix all these issues, they could become like a payment processor for getting coffee. They're also launching some DeFi applications. I don't really know how well that's going to work. I think there might be some spillage over from Ethereum since the fees are so high. But yeah, I see it as more of a payment network at this point. I'm wondering for the others in the group, what you think about these Ethereum killers, if you've come across some. I know that you guys have done
just in
some like
terms,
reading on Ethereum. And go ahead, Naomi.
Yeah, I've always been super interested in Avalanche. I think it's really cool. I like that they've developed this completely different consensus model. It's like this fourth iteration other than proof of work, proof of stake, delegated proof of stake. You have a Min's idea, which is quite distinct from all of that. And I was watching closely what they were doing on Bitcoin Cash with this, because I know that when Bitcoin ABC was involved, they were really trying to incorporate this as a pre-consensus layer. And that was cool, but apparently, that's sort of fallen through with the split on Bitcoin Cash. But I agree that this is definitely interesting if we're talking about instances where you need fast payments. If you want to buy your coffee and you don't want to wait for a confirmation, all of that, I think this definitely could be useful. So I am excited to see the technology develop further.
Well, I just want to say Ethereum killer as a term is so passe, bro. You got to get rid of that one. I don't think anyone's killing Ethereum. Ethereum has established itself as a huge force to be reckoned with, and I think these other chains again are going to have to find their calling card to attract people to them. Whether it's faster base layer payments, cheaper DeFi functionality on Cosmos or anything else, and I'm really interested to see what that that much vaunted multi-chain future will look like. But you know what? That's it for the show today. So at 3 p.m. on CoinDesk TV, we're going back to the original cryptocurrency, all about Bitcoin with Christine Lee. None of these Ethereum killers, none of this other base layer junk. All about Bitcoin.
No multi-chains.
Thanks for tuning in and watching The Hash. Bye, Will. Bye, Jen. Bye, Ben. Bye, Naomi.
Bye.
We'll see you tomorrow.
See you later.
Bye.
See you tomorrow.